The bus coughed once, twice, then surrendered me to the road with a hiss that hung in the early evening air. Black Hollow didn't have a welcome sign. The driver didn't spare a joke. He just tipped his cap and shut the doors. Diesel and dust, and then nothing. A row of houses sat with their porch lights already warming to dusk. Tall pines ringed the town like a dark wall. The sky between their needles was the color of bruised fruit, and the air held a damp chill rising up from the forest floor. I had a job, English teacher at the high school, 9 classes, tiny salary, smaller department, the sort of place where you coach track because there was no one else. Fresh start, I told myself. Somewhere quiet to get my head on straight, to stop thinking about everything that had fallen apart behind me. I rolled my suitcase over gravel toward the small rental house at the end of Pine Street. A white fence hemmed it in. The lawn was more moss than grass. The key waited in a ceramic dish on the stoop, right where the principal said it would be. I was turning it in the lock when footsteps scuffed behind me. New teacher? I turned. The guy on the walkway looked around my age, maybe early 30s, all wiry corners. Narrow wrists, narrow shoulders, narrow smile. He held a folded sheet of paper and a jar of canned peaches, the kind with a hand-inked label. "Thomas," he said. "Next door." He glanced at the sky, then at me. Figured I should bring this over first thing. "The peaches or the paper?" "The paper." He handed it to me. "Peaches are goodwill. The paper is survival." I almost smiled at that, but he didn't. His eyes kept moving, noting corners, windows, the tree line, the shape of the clouds. I unfolded the paper. "The rules. Lock every door and window before sundown. Close your curtains. Never look into the woods after dark. Do not acknowledge the whispers. No lights outside after midnight. Never leave your house between dusk and dawn." I looked up. "You serious?" "Everyone is." Thomas touched the jar lid, maybe to steady his hands. "You're going to hear stories. You'll think it's small-town superstition. I did too. 2 months later, I didn't. What happens if don't test them?" His gaze slid again to the trees. "Just don't." The conversation ended there, because across the street an elderly woman was sweeping her porch, with quick, nervous strokes. When her eyes found mine, she nodded once and carried the broom inside. A boy on a bicycle pedaled by fast, head down, backpack bouncing. One by one, other porch lights clicked on. It wasn't yet dark. I set the peaches in the fridge and leaned the rules against the salt shaker, telling myself I'd play along for a week just to be neighborly. Metaphor 1. The town wore its fear like a coat, buttoned up, tight at the throat. The school building used more paint than brick. Every hallway smelled of lemon cleaner and locker rust. By noon the next day, I had learned 3 things. Students here were quiet. The staff had perfected the art of polite avoidance, and everyone scheduled their life by sunset. Meetings ended early. Practices were done by 4. The custodian, Mr. Reams, moved through the halls turning deadbolts, with a pocket full of keys. "Storm coming?" I asked him. "Always," he said, and turned another lock. In my last period, a girl named Eli sat near the window drawing trees in her notebook, each trunk a careful pillar, each branch a spidery script that wrote secrets across the page. After the bell, she stayed behind. "You're in the house on Pine," she said. "Word travels fast." "It does here." She glanced at my bag. "You should head home early. It's Friday." "Why is Friday different?" "Because it's Friday," she said, like that had always been enough. She hesitated. "You read the rules?" "I did." "Follow them," she said, and hurried out. At 4:30, I walked home with my papers under my arm and the low, winter sun stuck between the pines. I told myself the early nights would be good for me. Maybe I'd get more sleep, cut the habits I didn't like. But I caught myself checking my watch again and again, as if the numbers might warn me of something. My senses already felt. Back at the house, I closed curtains I didn't remember opening, turned the deadbolts, and checked the back door twice. It felt exaggerated, but my body did it without complaint. I heated soup, graded journal entries about symbolism, and told myself this was just nerves, the newness of it all. When the clock hit midnight, I remembered Rule 5. No lights outside. After midnight. My porch light was on a sensor, but I toggled the switch anyway just to be sure. And then I went to bed and slept hard. Nothing happened. The following night, I followed the rules again. The night after that, the same. On the fourth night, my shutters rattled in the wind and a branch scratched the siding. But when I checked the back door, I know Rule 3, but it wasn't dark. In the yard, not fully. Nothing moved. No sound except my breath, too loud in the small kitchen. I laughed at myself and poured more tea. By the end of the week, habit had replaced fear. People build routines faster than they admit. I set timers, for the lights and for the kettle. I sorted laundry before sunset. I even started to sleep with the window open a crack because the night air was crisp and clean, and the sound of wind through the pines felt like ocean surf in my old life. By the end of the second week, I wanted proof. Metaphor 2. Curiosity. Was a splinter under my skin, small but impossible to ignore. I told myself a dozen reasonable things. New towns enforce norms by myth. Fear makes money for locksmiths. Kids here needed stories to point their terror somewhere other than the bleak future we kept handing them. I told myself all that and more. And on the next Friday, just as the last orange feather of sunset blew out, I broke Rule 5. I left the porch light on. At 12:03 a.m., it flickered. I grinned, ready to tell Thomas that his bulb was loose or his wiring old. At 12:05, the light dipped again, then steadied. Wind, I thought. The sensor catching a moth. I went to the window and lifted the edge of the curtain with 2 fingers. The street was empty. The houses opposite sat in their dim pools of light. My porch glowed steadily now, a circle on the stoop. The pines at the end of the road were a deeper black, but that was because the moon was hiding. I watched a full minute, 2, nothing. I let the curtain fall and shrugged at my own heartbeat. At 12:07, the whisper came. It wasn't a voice through the walls. It wasn't a phone vibration I'd forgotten. It was in the room, in the air. My name breathed in a tone I knew and didn't know at once. Gentle and patient. A kindness I hadn't heard in months. My chest stung. I turned the porch light off with a quick, clumsy hand. The whisper stopped. I slept with the window shut and the covers pulled to my throat like a foolish child. I dreamed of keys I couldn't keep hold of. The next morning, Thomas knocked with more peaches. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Fine." I considered lying more convincingly, then didn't. I left the light on. I heard something. The voice. He nodded. "It picks what you want most." "How does it know?" "It's been here a very long time." "What is it?" Thomas didn't answer. He unscrewed his jar and handed it over. "There are more rules than the paper says. Those are the ones new folks can manage right away. The others are harder. Like, never tell it your name after dark. Never walk with your shadow behind you. And never tell it what it wants to hear. Which is? That you'll come closer." I looked at his eyes and saw there the reflection of every winter he'd survived here. It wasn't superstition. It was memory. "What if I want to leave?" "Everyone wants to leave," he said. "Not everyone makes it to the road." I lasted 3 more nights before I broke Rule 3. It was a Tuesday. The school day had been long, a staff meeting with district people who spoke in acronyms, and a fight between 2 freshmen who looked too tired to throw punches. When I got home, I set my phone on the counter and stared at the curtains. The sky outside was still blue. Somewhere a dog barked twice and went silent. At 9:15 p.m., after I'd tucked the deadbolts and boiled the kettle and poured my tea, I pulled back the living room curtain and looked into the woods. At first, nothing. A trick of depth. The colors flattened, the shapes layered, the darkness acquired weight. The understory was a tangle of blackberry and fallen needles. The trunks like pillars. The path I knew from daylight was a smear of lesser dark leading inward. And then, from between 2 pines, 2 points of red bloomed and held. They weren't reflectors. They weren't coals. They stacked vertically the way eyes do on a face. They were patient. I let the curtain fall and sat on the sofa with my tea cooling and my hands not quite steady. Minutes later, voices whispered under the eaves. One voice, many mouths. My name again, softened, promised back to me. You're safe. You're welcome. You're forgiven. I pressed my hands over my ears and waited for the clock to wind its way to dawn. When the sun rose, I opened the door and sat on the stoop. The world looked foolishly normal. A snail traced a silver line over the fence rail. A mail truck hummed. I laughed without humor and went to work. At school, the kids were slow and glassy-eyed, as if they all had stayed up late. At lunch, I found Eli in the library. She was tracing a map of town on tracing paper, each street a careful vein. You looked out the window, she said. How did? You always do after you hear it. You've heard it? She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Everyone has. What is it? I asked her, and expected the shrug of ritual, the practiced I don't know that small towns use like punctuation. Instead, she said, It's the thing in the forest. It's the thing in the forest. That's not an answer. It's the answer we have. She traced another street. It stays to the woods in winter mostly, comes closer in spring, closest at new moon. That's when people disappear. Disappear how? She met my eyes. They get invited. I wanted to push harder. I didn't. I thanked her and left before I made her regret telling me anything at all. That evening, I pushed the couch against the most suspect window and stacked books on the sill of the other two. It made me feel foolish and better at once. I ate toast and soup and then toast again. I tried not to think of the two red points in the tree line. But at 11:40 p.m., when the house had settled and the air had cooled and the sound of the forest turned from wind to almost breath, a different noise came from my bedroom. Not a whisper, not a scrape. A tapping, small and patient, like someone wanted me to think it was the branch again. I stood in the hallway and waited. The tapping came, once more, then stopped. I reached for the knob and stopped myself. Rule 2, curtains closed. Rule 1, locks. Rule 3, never look. I stayed in the hall until my legs shook. At last the tapping ceased. I slept in the living room with my shoes on. I made it a week without breaking another rule. A week seems like a ledger's neat page that has not yet gotten smudged. Then, on a Saturday afternoon, the town held a farmer's market in the square. It looked like any market from anywhere. Mason jars and braided garlic and honey in bear-shaped bottles. But people packed up early and glanced toward the trees, and the priest rang the church bell at 5, not because a service was starting, but because the light had changed. That evening, sitting at my kitchen table, a thought pushed past my caution. If the thing could come to my window, it could come to the door. Which made me ask a more dangerous question. What would happen if I opened it? I tried not to think about it. I tried and failed. I told myself I was collecting evidence, being a scientist, and when midnight draped itself over the house and my pulse measured itself in my wrist, I slid the chain from the door, turned the deadbolt, and held the knob. Don't. The voice came from the other side of the wall. I froze. The voice was not the whisper in the air. It was Thomas, hoarse and low. Don't open it. I stepped back as if bitten. How did you know? He hesitated. Because I hear you moving, and because I did the same thing my third week here. I put my forehead against the wood. What is it, Thomas? He didn't answer. Then, strange and small, he said, My husband didn't believe. He opened the door. What happened? Silence pushed against the wood. Somewhere a raccoon tipped a trash can and the lid rolled in a lazy circle on the pavement. Thomas cleared his throat. It invited him for a walk. That was last spring. I'm sorry. Stay alive, he said. Don't make me say sorry to you. I slid the bolt home and stepped back from the door. I didn't touch it again that night. Late February dragged its dark hem across the town. Snow came in small, mean drips that turned the edge of the forest to a slick ribbon. Students grew twitchy with the confinement. Even the principal wore his tie looser. I graded papers and cleaned the tiny kitchen and learned where the floorboards creaked. I left a note of thanks on Thomas's stoop with a loaf of bread, and he left a note back that said, "If you get in trouble, bang on the shared wall. I'll hear." Another week and the moon went thin. The whisper came back, soft as steam over tea. It found me wherever I stood. It began to use voices I missed, the cadences that unlocked my chest. Sometimes I held my breath and it would go away. Other times it pressed against the windows until darkness felt like a pressure rather than an absence. I taught a unit on folklore. Kids raised their hands and told me how people tell stories to name danger, to hold hands around a fire, to teach rules without turning your throat raw. We diagrammed myths and broke their bones open. When I asked them to write their own, Eli turned in one line on the paper and slid it face down to me. "The monster is a vampire." 3 words, then the period like a nail. After class, I stopped her. "Why write it down?" "Because no one says it out loud," she said. "Not in front of adults." "Will it come for you because you wrote it?" "It already comes," she said. "It always does." I don't know exactly when I decided to test the rules again. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't boredom. It felt like the same instinct that makes you pick at a healing wound to see if the skin is truly knit beneath. The decision came to me while I was washing dishes, and lingered while I graded essays and survived my doubts when I brushed my teeth. By nightfall it was lodged. This time, I broke Rule 6. At 1:10 a.m., I opened the back door and stepped outside. The cold touched my mouth and ears and slid down my sleeves. The town lay still. No cars, no dogs, no clatter of lids. The trees tracked the sky. The stars looked brittle. I stood on my back steps and counted to 20 and told myself that counts were magic because I said they were. The whisper came from the yard, not the air. It wore a shape now just beyond the line where the porch light would have reached if I had turned it on. It stood at an angle to me, as if we had been caught mid-conversation and it had only just turned to listen. "Hello," it said. Its voice was every era, every person who had loved me without asking for something back. I couldn't breathe. For a second. "You shouldn't be here," I said, because that sounded like a sentence a sane person would try. "But you are," it replied, "and I am here for you." "What do you want?" "To walk," it said. I swallowed hard. "I know what you are." "Yes," it said, pleased. "Say it." I didn't. The word lodged behind my teeth. Metaphor 3. My voice was a locked door and I had misplaced the key. It came one step closer. I still couldn't see its face, only the pale shape of its hands and the set of its shoulders. "You've been lonely," it said. "You came here because you thought distance could solve hunger. It cannot." "I'm not hungry." "Everyone is," it said. "Some of us are honest." Behind me, floorboards answered a weight that was not mine. I turned. The kitchen door stood open. The house was dark except for a thin band of streetlight on the linoleum. The wind shifted, and the door moved a fraction, as if the house had taken a breath. For a foolish second, I thought Thomas had come in to pull me back by my sleeve like a reckless child. Then I saw the eyes, faint, inside, red, patient. A trick, I thought, a second self to herd me forward. I stepped onto the last stair. It tilted, its head. "You can come as far as the fence, then we will walk." "How far will we go?" "As far as you want," it said. "To the edge of the trees, to the lake, to the road, to your door again if that's what you ask." I obey the one who invites me. Is that how you took him? The question fell out before I could hold it back. The shape did not shift. He invited me. He said he could not bear the quiet. I took him for a walk. He does not miss you the way you think he does. Something like heat rose in my chest. You don't know what he felt. I know what he said. I took another step. Cold licked my ankles. The night leaned in as if curious. "Closer," it said. From the other side of the shared wall, abrupt and sharp, came the bang of something heavy striking plaster. I flinched. Thomas's voice tore through the night, raw, Get inside. The thing in the yard did not turn its head toward the sound. It only said with a soft amusement, "He is always so loud." I backed up, hands fumbling behind me for the knob. The thing's head tipped, in a gesture I almost read as fondness. "We will walk soon," it said. "You will invite me." I slammed the door. The bolt shot home with a sound so clean it felt ceremonial. I stood in the dark with my hands flat to the wood and tried not to shake. On the shared wall, Thomas banged once more, then slid down it with a long exhale. "Don't," he said. Spent. "Don't." I did not sleep. At 5 a.m., light began to thicken behind the curtains. The air eased its grip. Birds tried a few nervous notes. I made coffee and carried a mug to the stoop and sat while the sky learned how to be morning. At 8, Thomas knocked. He looked like 3 straight nights of bad choices. Hollow-eyed, jaw rough, one sleeve rolled where a bandage taped his forearm. "You're bleeding," I said. "It likes to scratch when it can't feed," he said. "Do you have bandages? Mine are committed." I cleaned the wound and retaped it. He watched me with the careful passivity of someone who had learned the hard way not to waste energy. "I can't keep doing this for you," he said. "I mean, I will, but I'd like you to keep your throat." "I'm trying." The words tasted childish. "It knows things I don't. That's its trick. How do we kill it?" Thomas laughed once, surprised. "You don't. Steak? Fire? Sunlight? Yes, but you don't get it to stand still long enough. It's patient. We're not. Then how has the town survived? We don't leave our homes at night." He pushed the gauze flat. "Which you should try. People disappear anyway. Some invite it, some run and their feet slip. Some make bargains they don't understand." He stood. "Please, don't be one of them." I wanted to promise. I wanted to stop wanting. The new moon crawled toward us over the next week like a storm on a radar map. Everyone could feel it without saying the words. The grocery store closed early. The priest ran evening service at 4 and skipped the hymns. Mr. Reams checked bolts with his key ring and counted under his breath. I taught my classes and left precisely at dismissal. At home, I read old books and ate what I could carry from the market in one trip. When the whisper came, I put my palms over my ears. When the tapping began, I moved to the couch. When the floorboards put on their opera, I put in earplugs and sang the alphabet under my breath. It must have seen me weaken because 2 nights before the moon went black, it tried a new thing. It brought a voice to my back door that was not a whisper and not Thomas and not a stranger. It brought my father's voice, 10 years dead, the cadence exact, the cough at the end of the sentence perfect. He asked me to let him in just for a minute, just to talk. I slid down the door until my knees hit linoleum and whispered, "You're dead." And the voice said, "I know." And it almost worked. At dawn, I threw up in the sink and laughed, and then cried and then laughed again because I was still in my kitchen. I wrote the rules on my forearm in marker, not because I didn't know them, but because I wanted something to look at when my brain tried to turn me traitor. That day, Eli did not show up to 3rd period. Her seat looked wrong without her elbow there. The office said stomach bug. I imagined the vampire's eyes in the doorway of their small house and scribbled comments on essays until my pen dug through paper. After school, I went to Eli Street and left a bag of ginger ale and crackers on the step. Her mother's eyes peered through the curtain and then withdrew. The town closed its throat. You can be careful and still make a mistake. You can be careful and still be captured by the thing waiting for your 1 weak hour. Mine came the night of the new moon. The town went silent before sunset. The last car pulled into the last driveway 3 minutes early. I went through the ritual, locks, curtains, lights, kettle, earplugs, like I was waxing a blade. I put the couch against the back door and the kitchen table against the front. I put the marker rules on my other forearm. I turned off my phone so I wouldn't reach for it for light. At 10, I lay on the floor because the bed felt too soft. At 11, I started to count. At midnight, I lost track. At 12:40, a tap sounded at the window above the sink, then at the back door, then at the shared wall. then at the ceiling, the attic space where my boxes were stacked. I pressed my thumb into my lifeline and told myself to breathe. The first board of the back step squealed, then the second. The third groaned under weight that had practiced pretending it was human. It did not whisper. It spoke through the door like a friend. Pitch perfect. "I'm cold," it said. "Let me stand inside a minute." I kept my teeth clenched. My tongue ached. "Or come out," it said. "I don't have to cross your threshold if you are precious about that." "I won't invite you," I said, and the room heard me and knew I had broken my rule about not talking back. The thing scratched the door with a slow, fond sound, like the way you might soothe a dog. "You will," it said. "You want to see how far we can go together." I thought of Thomas's husband and felt something hard crack across my ribs. I stood. That was the mistake. Standing gave me the illusion of action. Action opened doors inside me. It must have felt the shift. The scratching stopped. "Come for a walk," it said, delighted. "Just to the fence, just to the path." I told myself to sit down. I didn't. I moved the couch just an inch to let the door move if I had to run. The deadbolt gleamed like it knew more than me. I turned it. The door opened in an inch of cold. Then a hand, too pale, too long, slid into the gap and pushed, patient and inevitable, and the couch wheels met a ridge in the floor and stuck. I shoved back. The door squeezed wider. A face leaned into the seam. The eyes wrong, the mouth too still, the teeth too uniform, not like any human arrangement of enamel at all. "Hello," it said. "There you are." It did not grab me then. It let me look at it. Let me confirm. The stories let me feel the almost close the door, almost outrun, almost fight. Then it moved faster than my doubt. It caught my wrist and its touch burned cold. I didn't scream. Shock knocked the sound out of me. I drove the heel of my free hand into its face. It laughed, pleased, and pulled me through the door as if I weighed nothing at all. The night took us. The houses around us were blind. The street had no law. It did not drag me toward the trees. It walked at my side, fingers around my wrist, a mockery of escort. We moved down the steps, across the grass, over the fence at the back where boards had warped away from their nails. "Walk," it said. "Let's see where you want to go." I tried to twist free and felt bones shift in my wrist. "Stop," I said. "Say please." "Please," I said, because dignity is a thing for daylight. It tightened a fraction and released. "You see, you can ask. You can still ask me not to. That is what the rules are. Prayers disguised as chores." We reached the tree line. Metaphor 4. The forest mouth opened, not with teeth, but with the promise of them. Inside, the world smelled like rot and iron. My breath came loud. The trees creaked with old weather. Its hand on my wrist cooled deeper, an ache that traveled up my arm into my chest. "You will get used to it," it said. "People don't get used to this." "They do," it said. "Everyone gets used to everything eventually." I started to say Thomas's name, not to call him because calling would bring the thing's attention back to my mouth, but to remind myself I was not the only person in the world. It heard the shape of the letter and smiled. "Ah," it said. "Thomas. He has been so generous with his warning. He does not understand that warning is a form of invitation. You don't get to have him." "I already did," it said. "For an hour the night he begged me to bring back what he had lost. He paid that hour in skin. He owes interest." Rage sharpened my fear into a small, usable point. I drove my shoulder into its ribs and heard something crack. It made a pleased sound, then lifted me, spun me, pinned me to the bark of a pine, sap glued to my shirt. Its eyes shone red, then black, then red again. "Don't make me break you before I fix you," it said, and put its cold mouth to my throat. I thought of nothing noble. I thought not yet, because my life had been too much leaving already. And then the forest lit with a small, furious sun. A flashlight beam lanced through the trunks and struck the vampire's face. It hissed and reared and loosened. I dropped to needles and mud and saw boots hammering toward us, steady and unafraid. Thomas. A stake in his right hand, a hammer in his left, A strap of something silver looped around his shoulder like a bandolier. His breath tore, but his hands were sure. "Get down," he said, and drove the stake at the vampire's chest. It dodged, fast as a thought. The point glanced off bone, and the hammer caught the side of its skull with a meaty sound. It laughed, a delighted child, and struck Thomas across the face with its palm. Skin split. Blood sprayed fine. I grabbed the fallen stake and swung. It caught the vampire's leg. The thing looked down at me, amused, then stepped on my forearm and leaned, just shy of breaking. Pain flashed white. Thomas bellowed and looped, the silver strap around the vampire's neck. It shrieked then, high and wrong, and clawed at the metal with both hands. The scent of burned hair ripped the air. "Run!" Thomas shouted. I lurched up, grabbed the flashlight, and ran. He ran behind me, still hauling at the strap, the vampire attached like a furious kite. We did not pick a path. We followed the places where the ground looked least unfriendly. Branches raked, roots rose. The vampire howled, the sound splitting, so that it seemed to come not from ahead and behind, but from the inside of my own ears. We burst through the trees into the back lots of the houses on Spruce. Behind Mrs. Mooney's shed, a line of broken paving stones made a sad little walk. We tripped over them like drunks. The vampire found a purchase and hauled back on the strap. Thomas lost his feet and hit the ground hard enough that the wind kicked out of him. I turned and threw the flashlight. It hit the thing in the face. It flinched. The strap smoked. Thomas rolled. I grabbed his elbow and yanked. "Son," he wheezed. "Not." "Close," I said. "Close enough," he lied, and shoved me ahead. The eastern sky had not yet turned, but it had ceased to be black. Houses loomed as clumsy shapes. A dog barked once and shut up like someone had put a hand over its mouth. We hit Pine Street, and I tasted blood and pennies and something bitter. "It won't cross," Thomas panted. "Not past the mailboxes." "That's not a rule." "It is now," he said, and bared his teeth at the vampire. "Come on, then." The vampire stopped at the curb. Its face was burned where the silver had touched, skin peeling and drooling like candle fat. Its eyes had gone the flat red of brake lights. It smiled, perfect and wrong. "Later," it said. "We have all the time in the world." "Time is mine," Thomas said, and spit blood on the street. We backed to my door. I fumbled the lock, and then we were inside. Door shut, chain slid, bolt turned, table shoved, couch shoved. We collapsed on the floor and breathed like we'd been underwater. "Are you bit?" he asked. "No." "You?" He shook his head. "Scratched. It likes the theater." "Thank you," I said, and put my forehead to the floor. My whole body shook, now that it could. "If you hadn't, don't," he said, but this time the word was gentle. "I promised your dumb face I'd keep it breathing." We lay there until the sky admitted it was morning. Metaphor 5. Dawn slid between the blinds like a thin blade and cut the dark into pieces small enough to sweep up. Thomas sat first. He winced. "We have to go." "Where?" "Church." "Not for the God part." He gestured to his neck. "For the basement." I helped him up. We crossed to the church at the end of Pine, not looking at the trees. The priest unlocked the side door without comment. He kept a room below with cots and blankets and a kettle and a tin box of silver odds and ends that looked like a garage sale for vampires. He made tea and left us. We did not drink it. After a while, Thomas touched the bandage on his arm like he'd only just remembered he had skin. "You invited it?" "No," I said. I didn't say the word. I opened the door and walked. That was enough. It always is. He leaned back against the stone wall. "I should have left this town years ago." "Why didn't you?" He looked at his hands as if the answer were dirt under his nails. "Because leaving is hard. Because people here need someone to bang on walls, because I'm afraid it will follow." "Will it?" He shrugged. "I haven't tested that rule." I nodded. Something loosened in my chest then. Not relief exactly, but the beginning of something that might one day let me sleep. We left at noon. The town pretended not to see the dried blood on Thomas's shirt. At my house, I scrubbed the floor and the sink and the place on the wall where my shoulder had hit. Cleaning felt like telling the world I wanted to stay in it. That afternoon, Eli came by with her mother. She handed me a Tupperware of dumplings and didn't look directly at my wrist. "I was sick," she said. "I'm better now." "I'm glad." She shifted. "Sometimes it goes after new people the hardest, to teach them. Sometimes it goes after the loudest people next, to punish them." Thomas, from his porch, raised a hand. "I can hear you," he said. Eli cracked the smallest smile. "Good." When they left, I sat with Thomas on the stoop and watched the sun begin its long, slow slide. We didn't talk about plans or tactics or heroics. We talked about the grocery chain that might open a store 2 towns over and about how the school's vending machines only sold diet soda and about peaches. "Do you think I can learn to live with this?" I asked finally. "No," he said, "but you can live." I nodded. That felt honest. We did not sleep that night. We did not open doors. We did not look at the woods. It came to the curb and watched, patient, amused, ageless. It scratched the air with its attention. It waited for the one mistake it believed we would eventually make. We didn't. At 5:56 a.m., the horizon brightened. At 6:02, light touched the peak of the church. At 6:08, it reached the end of Pine Street. The vampire drew back into the trees with a look that might have been hunger or might have been respect. By full daylight, we were still alive. I went to work with a bandage on my wrist and a long sleeve rolled down and a voice too hoarse to read aloud. The custodian turned his keys. The principal nodded with a stiffness that said he'd heard. Everyone always heard, but they did not ask. The students wrote essays about monsters in books and monsters outside books, and Eli handed me her notebook, with the last tree drawn on the last page, its branches reaching just to the edge of the margin but not over it. After school, I found Thomas stacking wood at the side of his house in a neat, resigned way. He looked up. "We made it," I said. "For now," he said. "For now," I agreed. The words were small and solid, good enough to hold. That evening, I laid the rules on my table and smoothed the creases. I added a line in my own handwriting, small and stubborn, Tucker. "When you are weak, ask someone to bang on the wall." I taped the paper to the inside of my cupboard door where I kept the tea. When the kettle steamed, it fogged the tape and left the words clear. We ate dumplings on the stoop as the sun went down, and when the first porch lights blinked on across the street, we went inside, locked the doors, shut the curtains, and waited for the dark to pass. It passed. It passes. It will pass again. And when it doesn't, when we falter, when the old thing in the trees finds us with our hands too slow, there will be banging on walls and a strap of silver, and a voice that says run, and we will run until the thin blade of dawn finds us and cuts the night to pieces. Because in Black Hollow, rules aren't tradition. They're the difference between remembering and being remembered. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and would like more stories.